Hey, Peter.
Hey, Janai, how's it going?
It's going. Here we are back on the mic for another episode of our new podcast. And I'm excited to see what comes out of this. So, one of the things that is at the top of my mind, because I just read it not too long ago, is the latest edition of your forecast, which for those of you who don't know, Peter I don't think you describe it as a blog, but it's like a weekly reflection on social impact work, specifically Peter in social impact work. And
Really short.
right, but his premise is like insight and brevity. So they're like what, 250 words?
Around that, I try to keep it to about that.
Okay. But he starts off talking about red flags in RFPs. And we talked about RFPs in our last episode, but actually, why don't you talk about not, we're not throwing any names under the bus, but let's talk about, give some background on the RFP that you saw and your thoughts about it.
Yeah, so we come as consultants, right? We're always looking for RFPs to respond to, and for those who don't know, that's called request for proposals. Folks that are looking for consulting services, and you find them in different places. People send them to you, and it was like I came across one that was relevant to a sector that I know pretty well, and it was an organization that I knew of, but I didn't know. And no, I downloaded it, and ironically, my printer, when I printed it out, printed it in large format paper, which might have been a red flag right there that the universe is somehow telling me like, pay attention. Anyways, long story short, after I read through the RFP, I was like, oh my goodness, this organization, what they're looking for out of this strategic plan and the amount of budget that they put in compared to what they wanted out of it was so out of whack, was so like over the top. It was like they're trying to use the strategic plan to create to rein in what I could only read as is sort of an organization in free fall. And it's like, okay, how do we stop a free fall? How do we stop, kind of the chaos that we're facing? Oh, well, we get the strategic plan. And as we talked about before, we've seen strategic plans used for things that they have their place, but I'd say 9 times out of 10, they're used for things trying to solve bigger problems than what they're able to solve. So, yeah, anyways, as one of the things I appreciate about getting older is you start seeing things and be able to infer things more quickly and more easily. So you don't get into situations like, well, how did I get here? You see, if you will, the red flags much earlier. And this RFP was just full of red flags, so much so that I couldn't help myself. And I went through and I marked up the whole RFP with all the red flags that I saw in it. And then, ironically, I cut this part from the forecast. I actually accidentally ripped that whole draft up with a bunch of other papers I
Wow.
was getting rid of at the time. So maybe I just
Wow.
needed to get out of my system and move on. But Janae, you were talking about red flags in more like personal situations, and I was like, oh well, those are perhaps much more complex than what we'll ever face in terms of social complexity.
Thankfully. But one of the things that like particularly stood out to me as a red flag that you called out in the piece was when the client already seems pretty set on where they need to go. Like there's no room to shift.
Yeah. As consultants, hopefully we're bringing people who are hiring us because we're bringing a level of experience and perspective and, expertise, if you will, that a client may not have, on their own. And we see these RFPs and they're like very like well structured and well thought out. And I'm just like, well, why are you hiring a consultant? You've arrived at what you want to do. Just hire a part-time staff member and execute it that way. I think sometimes the best, relationships that I've had are really about co-creation. You also don't want a consultant coming in and like boxing you in. I see that oftentimes as well, right? As they come in with their own process, if you will, right? And they have their own box, and it's like, oh,
Who
whatever
does that? Who does that? Okay, well, anyway,
whatever size the
continue.
problem is, right? I'm going to put you in my box, and that's the way it's going to be. But I find that the best, outcomes are those things that are co-created.
Okay, so I was teasing because we had this rather, I don't want to say heated, but it was an intense debate last week about the role of process in your process and like how wedded you can be to moving things forward in a certain way. I will say this, I agree with you about keeping things adaptive and flexible. And I think being on this side of things, it's easier for me to see, like when I look at an RFP or even when I talk to a prospective client, like, oh, they're thinking that the solution is this, but there's so much that we haven't even interrogated, so many questions that have yet to be asked. And also, for both of us having seen enough and done enough in the field, we've even seen some cool and innovative. Oh my goodness, did I just use the word innovative? But in any case, some
That's a
cool
topic for another one of these episodes. The word innovation and Peter and Janai's different takes on the word innovation, but that's
That's
for
our
next
next
time.
episode. Yeah, but some approaches that, yeah, people haven't even thought of because they haven't asked the questions that would lead there. So can we start with asking the questions that are open enough and flexible enough that will lead you to places you may not have foreseen? That
Yeah.
being said, or on top of that, I know one of the last times that I was involved in a strategic planning process from the client side, what I wanted, what we as an organization wanted was for the consultant to come in and like offer us a perspective that we didn't have. I tried to frame the RFP that way. You know, we did our best. We wanted people who were out in front, not meeting us exactly where we were and like, here, we're going to help you get there, but like, help us take the blinders off and go to a place we haven't been before. Mission not accomplished. So I don't even know, like, how do we get consultants in the mindset of we can go there? How do we get clients to the point where they think we're willing to go there?
Yeah, and to your point, like obviously there were some red flags perhaps in that relationship that you missed early on,
Probably.
that you could have seen in terms of choosing who to work with. But they're hard to see, and I mean, I think sometimes and you also don't want to get arrogant enough that you can foresee everything in advance. When I look at sort of RFPs or documents or whatever, yeah, I try to keep my a healthy skepticism. I think is really important, and those it's not just skepticism, and it's not just like, oh, I'm just going to go wherever. It's that combination of kind of humility and assertion that I find is really important to develop. Working with anybody, right? You got to hear, but you also have to think, and you have to think critically. And hopefully, the older you get, and the more projects you've undertaken, and frankly, the more mistakes you've made, in my case, you learn from those. And those red flags you can see more further in advance. But I'm still interested in terms of red flags in personal relationships. Like, what are the red flags? Because is there an analogy to be made between consulting relationships and personal relationships? Because in a sense, we're working with people and we're working with clients, and I've been really fortunate. If any of my former clients are listening to this, I've been really fortunate to work with really great clients, for the most part, right? Every now and then you have somewhere where you just miss and you try your best, but for the most part, and I think that's just as important as really like, responding to RFPs now. I really try to, if I hopefully I'll know someone at that organization, those are the ones that I tend to be most interested in because I know the people behind them. Again, fewer red flags for me, fewer risks in terms of potentially moving ahead with something like that.
Yeah. Something that you said that stood out to me, and I can't even trace the dots now back to it, but just made me reflect on us, like how it has taken time for us to get here. Like, we were friends for some time, but that's a very different relationship than I'm going to start a business with you.
Did you have
And
red flags when we were sort of professionally courting?
yes, yes, I did. And the biggest one, and I mean, I'm not one to hold on to secrets. So I was very upfront with you. I'm like, how can somebody who has 20 years more life experience and professional experience with me say to me, I want to partner with you? I was fully prepared to be hired by you, to work for you, but not to partner with you. That to me was a red flag.
Hmm.
Um,
That's something I wrote about in the forecast, or at least I touched on it a little bit in the forecast, and how actually having experience, yeah, it can hopefully imbue you with better judgment and better foresight, if you will, but also can make you arrogant and get in the way. And being challenged, I think one of the things I really appreciate about you is you ask really good questions and you challenge my experience. And speaking as a middle-aged white guy, that's not the way the world often works. And that's something I really value about you is like you're not afraid to do that. And I wouldn't want to partner with anybody that I'm just going to do what Peter wanted. I've been in situations like that, and you've given me opportunity to grow, so I really appreciate that. We have about 40 seconds left. Any last comments on our relationship and red flags? Any red flags currently?
yeah, I actually just want to call you out. I mean, like, express my appreciation for the fact that as I said to you last week, actually, I apologized to you after one of our heated exchanges, and I'm like, Peter, I'm just being me. Sorry, I show up as my full self, and you're like, no, 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 don't apologize for that. Bring your whole self. And yeah, for this reason, I'm just so grateful for this partnership experience, actually.
Well, your whole self is a lot, but I mean that in the best sense, though.
No, I'm out
And
of the box now. Too late. You opened the door. Now I'm out of the box.
I wouldn't have it any other way. We are at time. Thanks so much, Janae.
Okay, thank you. Bye.